For 18 years, I paid child support for a daughter I thought was mine. On her 18th birthday, she posted a photo captioned, "Finally free from my fake dad." I saw it before I sent her a gift. I didn't say a word, just requested a DNA test. Her mom, my wife, refused the test. What happened next changed everything. I will tell you how it all unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jintan from Singapore. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. Lila came into this world with my last name and a full head of dark, jet black hair that made the nurses laugh because it stood straight up like she'd just stuck her finger in a socket. I remember that detail clearer than I remember most of my wedding day. Denise was drenched in sweat, cursing me between contractions, but when that baby finally cried, I cried harder. I wasn't in the room when she was conceived, I guess, but I was there for everything else. From the prenatal vitamins to the birthing classes, I was there. I signed the birth certificate without hesitation, standing tall, chest puffed with pride, watching them ink my name onto her records like it meant something sacred. And back then, it did. She was mine, my daughter, my legacy. The little girl who would someday call me daddy and run into my arms like I was the safest place in the world. I remember thinking, this is what life is for. I didn't have much, just a steady job, a small house, and a heart that ached to give everything I didn't get as a child. But I was ready to give it all to her. Denise and I had only been married a little over a year when Lila was born. We hadn't planned it. In fact, we'd been arguing about whether we even wanted kids yet. But when she told me she was pregnant, I felt something loosen in my chest. Like suddenly, all the late nights at work and missed vacations made sense. There was a purpose. I was building something for someone. The pregnancy was rough. Morning sickness that turned into all-day nausea, 2 scares that sent us to the ER, and a brief bout of preeclampsia that had me pacing the hospital floor like a man with nowhere to go. But I never once thought of walking away. Every baby book said stress was bad for the mother, so I swallowed mine whole. Even when Denise got cold, even when her temper flared and she shut me out emotionally, I told myself it was the hormones. I held her hand. I rubbed her swollen feet. I whispered to her belly at night when I thought she was asleep. From the beginning, I was the one who got up for midnight feedings, changed diapers with military precision, and knew the difference between a hungry cry and a bored one. Denise slipped into a kind of distant detachment after the birth. Maybe it was postpartum, maybe just who she was, but I filled the gap like I'd been made for it. My friends joked that I'd gone full dad before Lila could even say her first word. I memorized the characters on her favorite cartoons, kept a stash of snacks in the glove compartment just for her, and planned our weekends around nap schedules and library story time. I didn't resent it. If anything, I was proud. Being a father gave my life structure and depth. I'd never had a father growing up, just a series of uncles who drifted in and out of my mother's apartment. But I swore Lila would never feel that kind of void. Still, there were moments, tiny, flickering doubts I buried so fast they never saw daylight. Like the time my mother mentioned Lila's hair texture didn't run in our family. Or when Denise's old friend joked drunkenly at a barbecue that Lila's eyes are just like Rick's. I didn't know who Rick was, and Denise brushed it off with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. But I swallowed those moments like I swallowed every other discomfort in our marriage. Denise had always been secretive, guarded in a way that made me feel like I was earning pieces of her trust, not receiving them freely. But I convinced myself that every relationship had shadows, and as long as the light was stronger, I could live with the darkness. As Lila got older, she started pulling away from me in small but undeniable ways. She stopped calling me daddy and switched to dad, then just Nate around her friends. I figured it was teenage stuff, growing pains, hormones, the need for independence. She rolled her eyes more, sighed heavily at dinner, and spent more time in her room with the door closed. Still, she came to me when she needed help with homework or wanted to practice her speech for student council. We had our traditions: ice cream after report cards, road trips every summer, our secret handshake. She let me call her bug, even when she pretended to hate it. I held on to those moments like driftwood, trying not to notice how the tides were shifting. The cracks in my marriage to Denise had widened into canyons by the time Lila hit 16. We slept in the same house, but rarely the same bed. Conversations were transactional: bills, groceries, calendar appointments. She had a way of making me feel like a burden even when I was doing all the heavy lifting. I knew she was pulling away from me emotionally, but I figured we were just in a long, rough patch. We'd get through it. For Lila, if nothing else. But in my quietest moments, I started to feel like a placeholder in my own life. Like I was performing the role of husband and father while Denise read from an entirely different script. Still, I stayed. I kept showing up. I kept believing that consistency could fix what love no longer could. By the time Lila turned 18, I was exhausted but hopeful. I had been saving for months to give her a gift that would mean something, a symbol of everything I'd poured into her life. I bought a necklace with a small charm engraved with the words, "Always your dad." I wrote her a letter that took 3 weeks to finish because every sentence felt like it wasn't enough. I wanted her to know that no matter what happened between Denise and me, I would always be her father, that she was the best thing I'd ever done, that I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I wrapped the gift myself, tied the ribbon twice to make sure it stayed put, and placed it on the kitchen table beside a card she probably wouldn't read. That morning, as I sat down with my coffee, I pulled up Instagram, expecting to see a selfie or maybe a cake photo with some sarcastic caption. What I saw instead hit me like a freight train with no brakes. A picture of her grinning with friends, red Solo cup in hand, under a string of twinkling lights, captioned, "Finally free from my fake dad." 6 words. I read them twice, then 3 times, thinking maybe I was misreading it. Maybe fake meant something else. Maybe it was a joke. But it wasn't. She meant me. I was the fake, the imposter, the fool. I didn't send the gift. I didn't text her. I sat there, numb and hollowed out, staring at the photo like it had stabbed me in the chest. All the doubts I'd buried over the years clawed their way back to the surface. The hair, the eyes, the jokes, the distance. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. I opened a browser and started searching for DNA testing services. My fingers moved without hesitation. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was something deeper, something that didn't have a name. I just knew one thing. I needed the truth. And once I had it, there'd be no going back. When I first saw the caption, I tried to convince myself it was just a careless teenage mistake, one of those things kids post online without thinking about the damage it leaves behind. But the more I stared at it, the more intentional it felt, like every word had been chosen to slice me open and leave me bleeding in front of anyone who happened to scroll past her feed. Finally free from my fake dad. Free. As though my love, my effort, and my sacrifices were a cage. Fake. As though 18 years of diapers, homework, birthday cakes, college fund deposits, and whispered reassurances in the dark were nothing more than a performance I'd been faking. I couldn't understand it, not at first, because I had never once faked a thing when it came to Lila. I had been there, present and accounted for, in ways her mother never was. And still, she chose that word, a word that burrowed into my chest like a parasite and refused to let go. The house was quiet that morning, Denise still asleep upstairs. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at her smiling face surrounded by kids I didn't know, wondering when exactly she had started to hate me enough to write something so cruel. My mind replayed birthdays and holidays like a cruel slideshow, every memory tainted by this new truth that seemed to be pushing at the edges of my world. Was I ever really her father? Or had I just been the man footing the bills, the man too naive to realize he had been cast as a stand-in while Denise played a role of her own? I thought about my father, how he had abandoned me before I could even form a memory of him, and the promise I made myself at 10 years old that I would never let my child feel that same emptiness. I had given everything to keep that promise. And yet here I was, branded a fake by the very child I had devoted my life to. When Denise finally came downstairs, she found me sitting at the table, the coffee long gone cold in my cup, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles had gone white. She yawned, poured herself some orange juice, and glanced at me like I was just another piece of furniture in the kitchen. "You're up early," she said casually, not noticing the storm in my face. I slid the phone across the table and watched her expression shift from indifference to discomfort as she read the post. She blinked, cleared her throat, and handed the phone back to me like it was nothing. "Teenagers say stupid things online, Nate. Don't take it personally." Her tone was dismissive, a brush-off that only stoked the fire already burning in my chest. I stared at her, searching for even the faintest flicker of recognition, guilt, or alarm. But she just sipped her juice and said, "She doesn't mean it." I couldn't believe how calm she was, how easily she dismissed the knife lodged in my back. "Doesn't mean it," I repeated, my voice shaking with something between rage and disbelief. She called me her fake dad, Denise. Fake? That doesn't come from nowhere. Denise rolled her eyes, leaning against the counter like she was already exhausted by this conversation. "You know how dramatic she can be. It's social media. It's just for attention." But I wasn't buying it. Not this time. I'd ignored too many red flags, swallowed too many half-truths in the name of keeping our family intact. That single word, fake, was the crack that split the dam wide open. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I want a DNA test." The silence that followed was deafening. Denise didn't gasp, didn't protest in outrage like I half expected her to. She just froze, her face tightening for the briefest moment before she forced a laugh. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "After 18 years, you suddenly don't trust me?" I didn't answer because she already knew. I had trusted her for nearly 2 decades, and all it had gotten me was a daughter who publicly disowned me on her birthday. My silence seemed to enrage her more than anything I could have said. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm not putting Lila through some humiliating circus just because you're feeling insecure." Her refusal was all the confirmation I needed. A chill spread through me as the last threads of denial unraveled. "If you've got nothing to hide," I said quietly, "then prove it. Take the test." Denise slammed her glass down so hard juice sloshed over the counter. "No," she said flatly, her jaw clenched, her eyes hard. "I won't do it, and you need to drop this now before you ruin what's left of this family." I almost laughed at that, the sheer audacity of her trying to make me the villain in this story. I thought about all the times I'd looked at Lila and seen pieces of myself, the stories I'd told her about our family tree, the pride I felt when people said she had my smile. And now, standing in my own kitchen with my wife looking me in the eye and refusing to give me the truth, I realized it might have all been a lie. That day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell Denise. I didn't tell Lila. I just walked into that office with shaking hands and a hollow chest and told the attorney everything. He listened, nodded slowly, and explained the process. Because Lila was born during the marriage, the law assumed I was her father until proven otherwise. Without Denise's consent, I'd need a court order for a DNA test. It would be messy, it would be public, and it would destroy what little was left of our marriage. I nodded, every word solidifying the decision I'd already made. I couldn't keep living under this shadow. I needed the truth, no matter how much it cost me. The weeks that followed were some of the longest of my life. Denise alternated between cold silence and fiery accusations, blaming me for tearing the family apart, accusing me of abandoning Lila, weaponizing my love for her against me at every turn. Lila, for her part, barely spoke to me at all. When she did, it was short, clipped responses, as though she had already decided I was no longer her father. Each interaction was another cut, another confirmation that I was fighting for a truth that might obliterate me. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. At night, I lay awake replaying every moment of the past 18 years, wondering how many of them had been built on lies. Finally, the court date arrived. Denise sat across the courtroom, arms folded, eyes narrowed, every inch of her body radiating contempt. Lila wasn't there. Maybe that was a blessing. I don't know if I could have looked at her in that moment. The judge listened patiently as my lawyer explained the request, Denise's lawyer countering with arguments about emotional harm and family unity. But when the judge asked me directly why I wanted the test, I told him the truth. Because I need to know if my life has been a lie. The room went quiet. The judge granted the order. And just like that, the countdown began. When we left the courtroom, Denise brushed past me, her voice low and sharp as a blade. "You won't like what you find, Nate. You think this will give you closure, but it's just going to ruin you." Her words echoed in my head long after she disappeared into the parking lot. Maybe she was right. Maybe the truth would ruin me. But as I stood there clutching the paperwork, I realized the lie had already done enough damage. At least with the truth, I could finally decide how to move forward. I didn't tell anyone the exact date the DNA results were supposed to arrive, not even my lawyer. I kept that detail to myself like a secret weapon, not because I had some grand plan, but because I knew if I said it out loud, it would become real in a way I wasn't ready for. I was still holding onto the thinnest thread of hope, the kind that makes a man pray even when he's long stopped believing. Maybe she wrote that post in anger. Maybe Denise was telling the truth, or part of it. Maybe the court-ordered test would vindicate me, show everyone that I had overreacted, that my doubt had been a momentary lapse in an otherwise solid foundation. But beneath all those maybes lived a quiet, cold certainty that I tried to ignore, that the life I thought I had built wasn't mine at all, but a long, elaborate performance with me as the unsuspecting understudy. The weeks leading up to the test result were hell. Denise barely spoke to me unless it was through clenched teeth or emails about bills. She slept in the guest room with the door locked, and Lila started coming home later and later, sometimes not at all. When I asked her where she'd been, she'd shrug and mutter, "Out," as if I were some stranger asking invasive questions. She had stopped calling me Dad altogether. She didn't even use my name. Just silence, or annoyed glances, or cold, dismissive nods. The bond we'd built, all those years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and car rides filled with singing, evaporated like mist in the sun. I couldn't tell if she was following her mother's lead or if this distance had always been waiting beneath the surface, just biding its time until she was old enough to walk away. I went through the motions of daily life like a man sleepwalking through his own house. I went to work. I cooked dinner for people who didn't sit at the table. I fixed a leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom just because it gave me something to do with my hands. But at night, when the house was dark and quiet, I sat in my study and stared at the family photos on the wall, wondering if I should take them down. Each one felt like evidence in a case I didn't know I was being tried for. There was one of us at the Grand Canyon, Lila on my shoulders, grinning with her arms out like wings. Another of her twirling in the living room in the princess dress I bought her for her 5th birthday. I had poured so much of myself into that little girl, loved her with a depth I didn't even know I was capable of, and now I felt like I was being erased from her story, one cold shoulder at a time. When the envelope finally arrived, it came in a plain white package. No bells, no drama. Just a cold, clinical delivery that felt too small to carry the weight it held. I didn't open it right away. I set it on my desk, poured myself a drink, and stared at it for a full hour like it was a bomb I needed to defuse. My hands were trembling. I kept thinking about all the moments that brought me to this point. The night I stayed up sewing a button on her recital dress because Denise forgot. The time I stood in the pouring rain waiting outside a party to make sure she got home safe. The Sunday morning she'd crawl into bed with me and whisper, "I love you, Daddy." All of it sat in my chest like a stone, and I knew that opening that envelope could shatter every one of those memories. When I finally opened it, my eyes went straight to the numbers. I didn't need to read the fine print. One line stood out in bold, black letters. Probability of paternity, 0%. I sat back in my chair, the air knocked out of me like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the paper, reading the line over and over, until it stopped making sense. It was official. I wasn't Lila's biological father. I had loved, raised, and sacrificed for someone who, in the eyes of science, had no blood connection to me at all. And worse, Denise had known. She had to. You don't keep a lie that big for 18 years by accident. I don't remember walking into the kitchen, but I remember Denise sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone like the world wasn't collapsing. I laid the envelope in front of her without a word. She looked at it, looked at me, then picked it up with a sigh. She didn't even look surprised, just tired, like the truth had finally caught up with her and she couldn't outrun it anymore. "Well," she said, folding the paper neatly and setting it down like it was a receipt. Now you know. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just confirmation, cold and final. I stared at her, waiting for something, tears, remorse, even anger, but she just looked back at me like she'd been waiting for this moment, too. Who is her real father? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. She looked down at the table and said, "It doesn't matter." But it did matter. Because I had lived 18 years of my life believing a lie. Because I had built my identity, my purpose, my legacy around a child that wasn't mine. Because every time someone said, "She's lucky to have you," I had believed it meant something more than just a stand-in. I walked out of the kitchen and went straight to the safe in my study. I pulled out the documents, bank accounts, trust fund papers, insurance policies, and began the process of erasing them both from everything. Lila's college fund. Gone. The secondary card she had on my credit account? Canceled. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was doing it because I couldn't continue funding a life built on betrayal. I wasn't her father. Not legally, not biologically. And now, not emotionally either. That night, I sent 2 messages. One to my lawyer. We move forward immediately. And one to Lila. You got your freedom. I hope you use it well. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't expect one. I turned off my phone, poured another drink, and sat in the dark, listening to the silence of a house that no longer felt like home. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. But for the first time in weeks, I also felt something else, clarity. The kind that comes after everything has burned and all that's left is ash. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I would never let anyone lie to me like that again. There's a certain kind of stillness that follows devastation. It's not peace. Peace implies healing, acceptance, maybe even a little forgiveness. No, what I felt in the days after the DNA test was the silence of abandonment, like walking through a house after a fire's been put out. The structure still stood, but everything meaningful had turned to soot. I could still see the shape of my life, my marriage, my fatherhood, the memories etched into the walls, but none of it felt solid anymore. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and instinctively check my phone for texts from Lila, only to remember she wasn't reaching out. She hadn't responded to my message. Not even a period. 18 years of being her father, and she couldn't offer me a single word when I found out the truth. The silence was louder than anything she could have said. Denise moved through the house like nothing had changed. She kept making her green smoothies in the morning, kept watching her crime shows at night, kept leaving her shoes by the front door even though I had asked her 1,000 times not to. It drove me mad, her ability to pretend everything was normal. I, on the other hand, felt like I was decomposing from the inside out. She had shattered the foundation of our marriage, betrayed me at the most primal level, and yet she had the audacity to act like we could go back to small talk and grocery runs. On the 3rd day after the results, I finally broke the silence. She was slicing a pear at the kitchen counter like it was any other Tuesday when I said, "How long were you going to keep lying to me?" She didn't flinch, didn't pause, just kept slicing. "I don't know," she said. "Probably forever." And that was the most honest thing she'd said in years. The conversation that followed wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. I stood there, hands clenched, trying to hold myself together while she stared at me like I was the unreasonable one. I asked her who Lila's biological father was. She said it didn't matter. I asked if he'd ever been in Lila's life. She said no. I asked if Lila knew the truth before her birthday post. She shrugged and said, "She found out a few months ago." I guess she was angry. That answer sent a white-hot rage through me that I couldn't put into words. So she had known. They both had known. They had kept that truth from me while I kept signing checks, cooking dinners, and showing up like a goddamn idiot. And when Lila turned 18, when there was nothing left for Denise to gain from the lie, they dropped me like dead weight. "You let me love her," I said, my voice shaking, knowing the whole time she wasn't mine. Denise finally looked at me, and what I saw in her face wasn't guilt. It was weariness. "She needed a father," she said. "You were a good one. You were there. That should be enough." I laughed, loud and bitter, because I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. "Should be enough?" I repeated. "You build an entire life on a lie and you think I should just accept it because I was useful?" Her mouth twisted into something almost like pity. You're acting like she was some scam. She's a person, Nate. A person you loved. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to salvage. Because she still didn't get it. Or maybe she just didn't care. I hadn't just lost a daughter. I'd lost the version of myself that believed in her. In us. In this family. I called my lawyer the next morning and told him I wanted a full financial separation. No shared accounts. No shared assets. I didn't care how messy it got or how long it took. I wanted her completely removed from my life. We'd been living like strangers for years anyway. Now I just wanted it to be official. I also had him draft a letter revoking any financial support tied to Lila, college funds, health insurance, emergency accounts. Everything. It wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. They wanted freedom? Here it was. I had spent too long twisting myself into a pretzel, trying to be the kind of man they needed. Now I was reclaiming whatever was left of me. That same week, Denise tried to play nice. She made dinner, lasagna, my favorite. She asked if I wanted to talk things out. I looked her in the eye and said, I don't eat with liars. Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something close to regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. The next day, she came home to find the locks changed and her clothes boxed up in the garage. I wasn't going to give her the dignity of a sit-down separation. She had spent 18 years robbing me of my dignity. I figured a box and a cold front door was more poetic than anything I could say. Lila showed up 2 days later. She didn't knock, just walked in like she still lived there. She stood in the living room like she didn't recognize it anymore. Her eyes darted around like she was seeing the space for the first time. I was in the kitchen, arms crossed, waiting. She didn't say hi. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, you didn't have to cut me off. Her voice had that bratty, indignant tone teenagers use when they know they've screwed up but aren't ready to admit it. I walked around the counter and looked her dead in the eye. You called me fake, I said. You disrespected me publicly. You knew the truth and said nothing. You don't get to be surprised when I stop pretending everything's okay. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to push back. Maybe she thought I'd always be the soft place to land. She started to say something else, something about Denise, something about how it wasn't her fault, but I cut her off. You made a choice, I said. You sided with the person who lied. You disrespected me in front of the world. And now you're mad I took away the perks that came with pretending I was your father? Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't have an answer, just a wounded glare that didn't move me in the slightest. I'm not your dad, I said. You made that clear. So go be free. Go live with that truth. She left without another word. No apology. No tears. Just a slam of the door that echoed through the empty house. I stood there, alone, and for the first time since the test came back, I felt clean. Not healed. Not whole. But clean. Like the rot had been cut out. The house was mine now. The life was mine now. And every breath I took from that moment forward would not be wasted on people who saw me as disposable. Lila was never mine. And now, neither was Denise. There's a strange kind of liberation that comes from cutting people off. Not the petty kind born out of revenge or ego, but the kind that surfaces when you've exhausted every ounce of grace and patience you had, and the only thing left is your self-respect. I had spent 18 years paying into a life I believed was mine, emotionally, financially, spiritually. When that truth dissolved under the weight of one DNA test, the instinct to protect what was left of me kicked in like survival. So I went through every account, every document, every detail of the life I had built with Denise and for Lila, and I started severing the ties. I called the bank, closed the joint accounts. I removed Lila from my health insurance. The trust fund I'd set up in her name, liquidated. Every automatic payment connected to her, her phone bill, her gym membership, even the Spotify account, was canceled before the sun went down that day. I didn't know them convenience anymore. I didn't know them comfort. The fallout came quickly, as I expected it would. Denise was the first to react, showing up at the house in the middle of the day, pounding on the door like a woman scorned. I didn't let her in. I opened the door just wide enough for her to see my face, then leaned against the frame. You emptied everything? She hissed, eyes wide with disbelief. Lila needs that college fund. What the hell is wrong with you? I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just stared at her and said, She said I wasn't her father. You can't have it both ways, Denise. Her mouth opened, some new excuse already forming, but I wasn't interested in another round of her rehearsed remorse. Actions have consequences, I said, and shut the door in her face. Word spread fast. It always does when people start losing money. Mutual friends began calling, some out of genuine concern, others just fishing for drama. I got texts like, "Hey man, I heard something went down with Lila," or "Denise is saying you're being cruel, are you okay?" And each time, I felt the same mix of frustration and clarity. I didn't owe them an explanation. Not anymore. But I gave it to a few who mattered, just so the story wouldn't get twisted beyond recognition. I told them the truth. Lila wasn't mine. Denise lied. Lila disrespected me publicly. I responded accordingly. Most people went quiet after that, unsure of what to say when faced with the bluntness of betrayal. One or two had the nerve to ask if I would reconsider, if I'd give Lila a chance to apologize and make things right. And to them, I said the same thing every time. She had 18 years. Then came the voicemail. Lila. I hadn't heard her voice since the day she walked out. She didn't call directly, just left a message that landed in my inbox late one night like a ghost from a life I was trying to forget. Her voice was cold. Not angry, not sad. Just flat. Hey, I guess you made your point. You took everything away. That's fine. I'll figure it out. But you didn't have to make it this hard. You didn't have to punish me for something I didn't choose. And that last line, that was the one that stuck. Because I had once told myself the same thing, as a boy left behind by his own father. I didn't choose this. I had cried to my mother. And now Lila was saying it to me. But the difference was, I hadn't left her. I had been there, every day, every damn day, until the moment she decided I wasn't enough. I replayed that message 3 times, listening for any sign of remorse, any crack in her voice that might have made me reconsider. There wasn't one. What followed was a wave of guilt that came without warning. You don't spend 18 years loving someone and just stop because of a test result. I thought I could, but the heart has its own memory. I started questioning myself. Had I gone too far? Was I punishing a child for her mother's deception? But then I remembered the post. Finally free from my fake dad. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't an innocent mistake. That was a deliberate choice to strip me of my identity, to declare to the world that I was never real to her. And that made my guilt dissolve like sugar in rain. She hadn't just rejected my biology. She'd rejected my love. I got rid of the photos next. Every frame that held a memory now felt like evidence in a trial I lost without knowing I was on trial. The Grand Canyon trip, her 8th birthday party, the school science fair where I helped her build that volcano. I boxed them all up and drove them to a storage unit. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I couldn't keep pretending those moments meant what I thought they did. The only thing I left was one picture in a drawer, her in her graduation gown, smiling, looking proud. Not because of what it represented, but because I needed one reminder that I had done my part. I had raised her. I had gotten her across that finish line. Even if I was just a stand-in, I had shown up when it mattered. That meant something, even if it didn't to her. I started making real changes to the house. Painted the walls. Replaced the couch. Took down the wall calendar that used to be filled with her school events and filled it instead with weekend hikes, dinner with friends, the names of books I wanted to read. I reclaimed my life, one small decision at a time. A friend of mine, Greg, from work, stopped by with his 2 kids one weekend just to catch up. He asked how I was doing, really doing, and I told him the truth. It's weird. It's like mourning someone who isn't dead, but who still doesn't want you. He nodded, didn't try to fix it, just clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You did your best. That's all you could do." And for the first time in weeks, I felt seen. The legal separation finalized faster than I expected. Denise didn't fight it, probably because she knew she had no ground to stand on. We signed papers in silence, sitting across from each other in a lawyer's office like 2 business partners ending a failed merger. No tears, no final pleas, just ink and silence. When it was over, I walked out and didn't look back. I didn't need to. There was nothing left in her that belonged to me. That night, I sat on the back porch, whiskey in hand, and looked out at the yard I used to mow with Lila trailing behind me, pretending the little plastic mower actually worked. I remembered the time she fell and scraped her knee, how she cried until I picked her up and whispered, "It's okay. Daddy's got you." And now I sat alone, older, angrier, but also lighter. I had been her father in every way that mattered, except the one she decided did. And that was her choice, not mine. They say the truth sets you free, but what they don't tell you is how heavy freedom can feel when you first pick it up. It doesn't come wrapped in clarity or peace. It comes in silence, long, uncomfortable, echoing silence that follows you like a shadow. In the weeks after everything was finalized, the DNA test, the financial disconnection, the legal separation, I didn't feel powerful or vindicated. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep can fix, but the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that makes your favorite chair feel like just another place to be reminded of who's no longer sitting across from you. I had won, if you could call it that. But winning didn't mean I walked away unscathed. It meant I was free. And freedom, as it turns out, isn't just a door opening. It's also a door closing behind you with a final, irreversible click. I kept expecting to feel something more triumphant: relief, satisfaction, closure. But what I felt was more complicated than that. There were days I woke up and had to remind myself I wasn't responsible for Lila anymore. That there was no college bill waiting, no birthday party to plan, no last-minute runs to CVS for poster board and glitter glue. My calendar had emptied itself, and with it, so had a huge part of my identity. I had spent 18 years being her father. That wasn't a title I wore like a badge. It was something I carried like a second skin. Now, stripped of it, I felt exposed. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I was just Nate. And figuring out who that man was without them took more courage than confronting the truth ever had. I started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I needed help understanding why I'd stayed so long in something that had been hollow for years. My therapist, Dr. Jacobs, a gentle man with kind eyes and a ruthless way of cutting through my defenses, helped me unravel it. "You weren't just trying to be a father to Lila," he said one day. "You were trying to heal the little boy inside you who never had one." That line cracked something open in me. He was right. I hadn't just been loving her. I had been rewriting my own story through her, giving her what I never got. And when that identity collapsed, so did that version of healing. It was like losing two people at once: the daughter I thought I had, and the man I thought I was becoming by loving her. The house became a project. Not a metaphorical one, but a literal, full-on renovation. I tore up the carpet in the living room, repainted the walls, replaced the backsplash in the kitchen with tiles I actually liked instead of the ones Denise picked out during one of her many HGTV binges. I donated furniture, bought a new mattress, rearranged the living room so it no longer revolved around the TV we used to gather around as a family. I needed the space to feel like mine. Not mine and hers. Not ours. Just mine. It was strange how healing came in the shape of hammer swings and paint fumes. Every change I made felt like a declaration: I am not going back. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A letter. Handwritten. The return address wasn't Lila's, but I recognized the name immediately: her aunt, Denise's sister, Janine. We hadn't spoken much over the years, just the occasional birthday party or holiday dinner. She always struck me as the quiet observer, the one who saw more than she said. Inside the envelope was a short note. "Nate, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what you're going through. I never knew the full truth, but I had my suspicions. For what it's worth, you were the best thing that ever happened to Lila. I hope someday she realizes that. You didn't deserve any of this." I read it twice, then a third time. And then I cried. Not because it changed anything, but because it was the first time someone, anyone, had acknowledged the hell I had walked through without questioning whether I had caused the fire. Some nights, I still thought about Lila. Not in the aching, desperate way I did before, but in that quiet, reflective way you think about someone who meant something once. I wondered if she had regrets. If she looked at her bank account and missed the support, or if she looked at old photos and missed the man who was always in the background, arms open. I didn't hope for reconciliation. I didn't wish for a reunion. But I did hope she would grow into someone who understood the cost of her choices. I hoped the word fake haunted her for at least as long as it haunted me. There's a quote I came across one night while reading. Something about forgiveness not being about letting the other person off the hook, but about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying the hurt. I wasn't ready to forgive Denise. I don't think I ever would be. Some betrayals dig too deep, leave scars that don't fade. But I forgave myself for not seeing the signs, for staying too long, for believing love alone could keep a family together. I had done the best I could with what I knew. And when the truth finally stared me in the face, I didn't run. I faced it. I stood tall in the rubble and started rebuilding. One morning, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and the kind of stillness I used to crave but never had, I realized something. Lila's post had said she was finally free. At the time, those words had gutted me. But now, I saw them differently. She had freed herself. And I had too. She had walked away from a father she thought she didn't need. And I had walked away from a lie that almost broke me. We were both free. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the tragedy I once thought it was. Maybe it was the ending we both needed, even if neither of us understood it at the time. So here's the truth I carry now. I was her father. Not by blood, but by every damn choice I made. I showed up. I stayed. I loved her when it was hard. That doesn't disappear just because the DNA didn't match. It doesn't vanish because she threw it away. It lives in me, in how I treat people, in how I carry myself, in how I've learned to love again, this time with my eyes wide open. She said she was finally free. And so was I. Have you ever found yourself betrayed by the people you trusted most? What would you have done in Nate's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've ever had to walk away from a family built on lies. If this story hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful stories about truth, betrayal, and reclaiming your life. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. See you soon in the next story.